we spoke about like what are some of the difficulties that come up when playing with kids and why it's so hard for adults to play with their children. And today we wanted to give like practical tools and practical advice of what to do with a child when you find yourself having such a difficult time sitting with them and playing with them, because we all know that play is important, but it's also important for the parent to be able to do it at that point.
Yes.
It's not helpful if the parent isn't enjoying it and isn't having a good time while they're doing it. So we want to sort of like teaching parents how to play.
Yes. I think that the first thing is boundaries around it. For yourself, just knowing that this is not going to be an endless 3-hour nightmare. If this is something that you're struggling with it, it's okay to set a time with your child and to say like, hey, we can do this game right now, but I'm only available for 10 minutes. And I think that a lot of times, the response to that might be a tantrum. Say, I understand that that's frustrating, but I can either do 10 minutes or no minutes.
Yeah.
And then I think that by learning how to be present in those 10 minutes, which we'll go on to talk about, I think that maybe that could lead you to the next day or the next week being able to do 11 minutes and being able to do 12 minutes. But if you don't start with a boundary, you can't stretch the boundary.
Right. It has to be like clear parameters. Like I remember reading this book. It was called 15-Minute Mom or 15-Minute Parent.
Oh my God.
And it was basically right. It's like
Give me that
how to
book.
make this concise. Like so it was saying how like you only have to be present and really, really present for those 15 minutes a day.
Yes.
And 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes when they come from school, and 5 minutes from bedtime. And that's really all it takes. The rest of the time, like the child can be an independent play. And I know that sounds like it's a very nice, like
right.
wrapped
Sounds
up
very
present,
short,
but I was like kind of
I want to hear more about it.
because yesterday when I was doing a little bit more research, they were actually saying you only have to be a 5-minute mom. And I was like, wow, like it went from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. Like, maybe next time it's going to say like 30-second mom. But here we are, like 5-minute mom. And I think like just the concept, I don't know if it's like literal in its terms, but the concept is that the child needs those present 5 minutes. And that means that nothing else is on your mind. That means that you're really with them. And 5 minutes, we all can do 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a long time.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
I think that's a really good point, because I think that like it can get overwhelming. Like a whole day of parenting is really hard. But if you can break it down and you can say like, I love this 15 minutes idea and I need this book. But if you can say like, the morning's hectic. Everyone's getting dressed and you're running. And did you eat breakfast? And like somehow my mornings, everyone's crying at the end of the morning before we get to school. Like,
I hope not you.
It's questionable. But if you could say like 5 minutes in this morning, give them that extra kiss, that extra hug. Like I love this. Like this is my first time hearing about it and I love it. And you could be really present in those 5 minutes. And then 5 minutes when you pick them up from school. So between picking them up from school till bedtime, like those hours seem endless. It's not that I have to sit and play with them for an hour. It's like, let me give 5 minutes of being present.
Yeah.
And then again, bedtime, laying in bed, 10 books. You know what I mean? 5 minutes of being present.
Yeah.
And it just makes it so much more manageable for the parent. So much more contained and so much more feasible. And when you're working with something that's feasible, then you can work. If a mom is living like, wow, 15 minutes, that sounds so little. You can stretch it if you have the capacity. But first, we need the boundaries and the containment.
Yes, exactly. And, in that 5 minutes and 15 minutes, like the one thing that they said is that it must be with each child individually. It can't be like, 5 minutes with, 8 kids.
Well, now you just made it harder for a mom that has 5 kids. It's no longer just 15 minutes.
Right.
So we already talked about in part 1 about like goodbye to those negative mantras. Goodbye to those negative thoughts because they're not helping us. But I think positive mantras as well can be really helpful because we have so much going on in our life. If you pick those 5 minutes that you decide that you're going to be present, I think it's important to say like, this is my priority right now. And there's nothing that's more important than doing this right now.
Yeah.
I think that's really hard, right? Because you can have dishes in the sink. You could have dinner that needs to be made. You could have your phone pinging. But if you can just separate from everything for 5 minutes or however long you decide and say, right now, there is nothing more important than what I'm doing right now, it gives you a sense of security of, wow, I need to be doing this. Versus an overwhelming feeling of everything that I need to be doing all at once.
Right. And it's kind of hard to like make those separations because there's always so much going on. But, back to what you said before about it only has to be a boundaried amount of time, that can make it a whole lot easier.
Right. Because it's a little bit impossible to have your whole evening focusing just on your children because so much else is going on. But you pick that time, you tell that to your mantra. And I think that time then could be so valuable. I think back to this like 15 minutes of what you said. I recently also heard that, kids do better if the mom comes home later and then is like in a better mood and present than a mom who picks up their kid earlier and is, let's say, in a bad mood and not good. And this was related towards research that I was doing about like people liking their jobs and not liking their jobs actually. And they were saying like better work at a job that you love that has more hours because you're going to do better for your kids than picking a job that you hate, but it's half a day and then you're in a bad mood. So it wasn't even related to parenting. And I was like, wow, that's so powerful. Because I always thought like, okay, maybe if my time isn't quality, at least it's quantity. Like I'm picking up my kids early. I'm with my kids a lot. And like, if that means that you need to go to the gym before you're being with your kids, so you're in a better place with your kids, that might be something to think about.
Right.
And it's very hard. I know that.
Yeah, I think you need to think about like, the expectations of like the type of mom that you think you need to be versus the mom that you actually can be. I remember working with a woman a long, long time ago who was overwhelmed, and she used to go from work to pick up her kids and then to the house, and she felt like, I don't have myself until 10 o'clock at night. And there was no space. And so she started resenting her kids and feeling like, angry at them that like they were taking over her life. And we gave a small intervention. And I said, why don't you have somebody else bring home your kids? Why don't you go from work to home, and then you'll have that, few minutes in the car. So that way you'll just be able to like listen to music, call somebody, or, even listen to a podcast, like do whatever you need in that time for you. So that way when you come home, you'll have more energy for your kids. That simple change made her lose the resentment.
Yeah.
It went away, and it was amazing because, at first she was like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I like my kids? Like, why am I having such a hard time with them? And it was just that simple like switch of saying, you just need a few minutes of fresh air. Like to go from a mindset of work to a mindset of home to crash in bed to sleep. Like there's no time for you to just have a breather. And that's all she needed was those 10 minutes. And I was amazed by how it was such a small intervention, but it changed her whole approach.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to implement because there's so much mom guilt already. I mean, this generation, a lot of us are working, and that's already guilt as it is. Like, oh, I'm sending my baby out, or I'm not there to pick up or drop off my child by the bus. And there's so much like shame about that. So it's to like even take more time for ourselves. I feel like that's at least for myself where the conflict comes up. But I think this like lesson, and like it's hard to really implement it, of that like it's quality more than quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be something to reconsider. If you feel like you're not giving quality time to your children, maybe give less time but more quality time.
Exactly.
I referenced her before, who's a clinical social worker who works with children. She said also like, the same like concept of like not having to spend you don't have to spend so much time with kid, but if you want to get the most for when you're working with kids, a way to be present with them is to kind of like acknowledge what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Thought that was interesting. Like she was like, oh, so interesting, you're putting your doll here.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh wow, that you're building a tower sideways.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, she said it was explaining was a really good way to build meaningful connection with your children.
I love that because like you're just responding to it. I think there's like a certain pressure of how am I going to entertain my kid? What am I going to do with them? Like I have to be exciting, or in order to be a good mom, I have to be like, this day camp, like running this day camp and making it super exciting. And like ultimately it doesn't have to be so exciting. It could just be responding to them. You don't have to be the one to take the lead, right? There's independent play, but then how do you enter into their play? Like when you want to connect, you just sit there and you watch it until they invite you to come in. Once they invite you to come in, you then play the role that they want you to play. They know how to play. You don't need to teach them this. They'll allow you to come in. So if they're playing, let's say, they're baking something, mommy, I'm making you pizza and I'm putting the peppers on top of the pizza and I'm cutting the pizza. And then you come in and, you're eating the pizza. You're making believe you're eating it. Like, you don't need to tell them how to run a pizza store.
Right.
Like, you don't need to tell them how to cut their pizza. Like, you don't need to fix anything about it. You don't need to come up with the idea. Get up, get dressed. Why aren't you dressed? Like, get to school. Like, why aren't you doing your homework? Like, why'd you spill that on the floor? Like, parents are like, they're bossing kids around, which is obviously like kids can't run the world and they need to be told what to do. But when they're in the place, like the play mindset, and when they're in the play space, that's their chance to be the ones who are directing. Like they're the ones that are going to tell you like how to cut the pizza. And like, I think parent doesn't want to necessarily be told what to do. I'm so used to telling you what to do. You're going to tell me what to do now. But I think like that's also like a really nice like relief of you don't have to tell them what to do anymore here. Like we're in a fantasy world together. We're in this imagination space where we're going to be playing. Like you tell me the rules of your pizza store. You tell me how much I have to pay for that pizza. Like you tell me what bracha to make, right? And it's interesting because a lot of like what they will say is what you've told them in the past. Like, like, okay, mommy's ready now, to go to the store. Let me take my pocketbook. Oh, wait, I need to go to the bathroom first. Like, make sure that you took your keys. Like, it's almost like they're going to be repeating what it is that you're saying, but you don't have to necessarily like guide them. They can do the work. Let them guide you. All you have to do is repeat after them.
Right. So you have to be able to be comfortable of taking off the mom hat for a minute and being present in the moment, which is hard, but also important as a mom for yourself. Yeah. Let alone how important it is for your child. It's important for us as individuals.
Yeah. And, I have a lot of my friends who one of the things they struggle with is they feel like their personalities are intense, and therefore the play becomes intense.
Mhm.
And so instead of it just being like silly or playful, it's like, well, what lesson can I teach you in this game, or what
Right.
lesson can I teach you through reading you this book? Like everything has to be educational, or if we're cutting the pizza, I'm going to teach you manners. Like make sure you're wiping your face. And I think what happens in that is it needs to be a little bit more relaxed, because the whole thing about play is that it's not structured and there aren't rules. And
Yeah.
yes, play does give you the opportunity to teach things, but not everything has to be a teachable moment. Like
Right.
if anything, that's feeding into like the play has to be productive.
Right. I think that like what Devorah said about just like acknowledging what's happening in
Yeah.
itself is so teachable because
Right.
it shows them that they're being seen and they're
Mhm.
valued.
Yeah, exactly.
We all want to be seen and valued.
And just focused on like back to what you were saying earlier about the phones, how everything is so connected with phones, and time span, like attention span is so much harder than it was in the past. When you give your child that attention, like they don't usually have that.
Right.
And to do it is harder, but also for them to receive it is so much more important.
So I think that's something that's helped me a lot of times is if I don't have, the time or the headspace to sit down and play, is making different activities playful. So I would then, let's say, bake something with my children, or I would have them involved in cooking dinner. And I know some people are like, ew, I can't have my kids' hands on my food. But like even sometimes if it's fall, like I'll give them their own dough and then they can like spend an hour with that dough. And then I feel like, oh, good, I got something checked off my list, which again, we talked about the importance of being present in play. So I don't want one to take away from the other, but you can't do that the whole day. Sometimes you need to get things done.
I really like this because it's a win-win for both. Like it doesn't mean just because like your child is having fun, you have to suffer. Like
Exactly.
it can be like an equal. You can meet each other midway. But I think like what you're really talking about is that it's not always the activity. It's just like we don't have to say like this is an isolated play time.
Exactly.
Like it can be like within life. Like you can be sitting in the car and they start chanting like a song, and you respond back to the song, and then before you know it, everybody's just giggling and laughing. Like that's the playfulness and the silliness also that can be like integrated into everyday life, where it doesn't have to be like, okay, from 5 o'clock till 5:30, like that's when we're going to be doing Magna Tiles and Lego. After that 6 to 6:15 is story time. Like play doesn't have to be like so intensely structured in that way. Like there's little moments where you can like instill that connection, like when everyone is like waking up in the morning and then like tickling, like fun and connecting and playful, not the word fun, playful with them. And it doesn't have to be like this like big moment of like a big activity, or let's have like a paint day at the table and just get the house all messy. Like it can be like those little moments of making challah together.
Exactly. Don't laugh, but one of my favorite games playing with my kids is hide and seek, because then I go on a hand in my bed. I'm not even joking.
Do they find you?
Then they find me. And then when it's my turn again, I go hide in my son's bed. And then when it's my turn again, I go hide on the couch under a blanket.
So it's like opportunities for you to sleep.
We do the Shabbos morning for hours. And my son hides in wherever he's hiding, and then whenever it's my turn, I get to go hide in some place that I can lay or sit.
It reminds me of like the quiet game. Like, who could be the quietest?
Contest.
Yeah, quiet contest. Like who can be the quietest the longest, and like whoever talks loses.
Yeah, and I think that the point of all this is that like what we said before, that sitting and playing is hard, and you don't always have to do the play that they want to do.
Yeah.
It is important, I think, to give a certain amount of time that you will indulge in what they want to do. Like it can't always be what you want to do. But as parents, we have our, we're not capable of sitting and playing chess or whatever. Chess is probably very advanced, or Candyland for 7 hours, or reading the book for 7 hours, or do imaginary play for 7 hours. Sometimes we need to be creative, whether it's having them involved in the baking or the cooking, or making up your own game of hide and seek where you keep getting to go back into bed.
Right.
It could be an easier way to connect.
I think like the fear is like if you're not playing enough or you're not giving enough attention, like there's not going to be connection later on. And because of like that pressure, every moment it's like, is this an opportunity to play? Is this an opportunity to play? And like because kids are playing basically the whole day, it feels like every opportunity is a lost opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think, that's a good point that you're saying, because I've definitely heard that before about people being scared of what their future, what their child's going to look like. And my response to that is always, it's like, we don't know. We can't guarantee the future. You have to do the best that you can do with the tools that you have in the moment.
Right.
That's the most that you can do.
Right. And I also feel like, we grow up saying like, this is what we received and this is what we saw, and either we want to duplicate it or we want to move away from it. So, my mom did this, my dad did this, like, I want to change it or I want to keep it the same. in the hopes that your child won't feel what you felt. But ultimately, your child is not you. And so whatever they go through, there's going to be something else about yourself
Exactly.
that they're not going to like. And, so you try your best, but then recognizing that there's still going to be some shortcomings and it's not the end of the world. Like there just has to be the foundation of that connection. And that's what the play is. The play is all about connecting in their way, connecting in your way, and finding time to really bond.
Yeah, I love that about like kind of bringing it down to play is connection
Yes.
and making that space for you to connect to your child that way.
Yeah.
So I think that we really, between part 1 and part 2, we really touched upon why play is so hard and, some little ideas to combat it and make it easier.
Yes, because, at the end of the day, we all want to bond and we all want to connect, but it doesn't have to be torturous. You don't have to feel like play zone is a torture zone. It can be enjoyable. And, the key in everything is when it's more intentional, when you learn about it, and when you have more opportunities and when you have more tools and to know how to do it, that can be more reassuring and make it easier for the parent.
Yeah. And I love this, and I'll let you know in 6 months if how it worked.
6 months or 10 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.